We bought an old house, my boyfriend and I. He's in charge of the new construction, converting the kitchen into the master bedroom. For instance, while I'm on wallpaper removal duty, the previous owner papered every wall and ceiling. Removing it is brutal, but oddly satisfying. The best feeling is getting a long peel, similar to your skin when you're peeling from a sunburn. I don't know about you, but I kinda make a game of peeling, on a hunt for the longest piece before it rips. Under a corner of section of paper in every room is a person's name and a date. Curiosity got the best of me one night when I googled one of the names and discovered the person was actually missing. The missing date matching the date under the wallpaper. The next day, I made a list of all names and dates. Sure enough, each name was for a missing person with dates to match. We notified the police, who naturally sent out the crime scene team. Overheard one text say, "Yep, it's human." Human? What's human? Ma'am, where's the material you removed from the walls already? This isn't wallpaper you were removing. It was skin. He awoke to the huge insect-like creatures looming over his bed and screamed his lungs out. They hastily left the room and he stayed up all night, shaking and wondering if it had been a dream. The next morning, there was a tap on the door. Gathering his courage, he opened it up to see one of them gently place a plate filled with fried breakfast on the floor, then retreat to a safe distance. Bewildered, he accepted the gift. The creatures chittered excitedly. This happened every day for weeks. At first, he worried they were fattening him up, but after a particularly greasy breakfast, left him clutching his chest from heartburn. They were replaced with fresh fruit, as well as cooking. They poured hot, steamy baths for him, even tucked him in when he went to bed. It was bizarre. One night, he awoke to gunshots and screaming. He raced downstairs to find a decapitated burglar being devoured by insects. He was sickened, but disposed of the remains as best as he could. He knew they had just been protecting him. One morning, the creatures wouldn't let him leave his room. He lay down, confused, but trusting as they ushered him back into his bed. Whatever their motives, they weren't going to hurt him. Hours later, burning pain spread throughout his body. It felt like his stomach was filled with razor wire. The insects chittered as he spasmed and moaned. It was only when he felt a terrible squirming feeling beneath his skin that he realized the insects hadn't been protecting him. They had been protecting their young. Everyone loves the first day of school, right? New year, new classes, new friends. It's a day full of potential and hope, before all the dreary depressions of reality show up to ruin all the fun. I like the first day of school for a different reason though. You see, I have a sort of power. When I look at people, I can sense a sort of aura around them. A colored outline based on how long that person has to live. Mostly everyone I meet around my age is surrounded by a silent green hue, which means they have plenty of time left. A fair amount of them have a yellow-orangish tinge to their auras, which tends to mean a car crash or some other tragedy. Anything that takes people before their time, as they say. The real fun is when the auras venture into red end of the spectrum. Every now and again, I will see someone who's basically a walking spotlight. Those are the ones who get murdered or kill themselves. It's such a rush to see them and know their time is numbered. With that in mind, I always get to class very early so I can scout out my classmates' fates. The first kid who walked in was basically radiating red. I chuckled to myself, too damn bad, bro. But as people kept walking in, they all had the same intense glow. I finally caught a glimpse of my rose-tinted reflection in the window, but I was too stunned to move. Our professor stepped in and locked the door. His aura is a sickening shade of green. So I live in Eastern Oregon, and my mom lives in Western Oregon. I went to visit her for the summer, and she's very outdoorsy. We decided to take a 1-hour drive from her city to the coast. We end up at this free campsite at the top of this hill, and we're the only campers there. We relaxed for the rest of the day, made food, etc. A truck full of men drive up the hill and talk with my mom, and they leave us. Fast forward to the middle of the night, I wake up to my mom sitting straight up in the tent. I wake easily, so I heard her gasp and it woke me up. As soon as she saw I was awake, she put her hand over her mouth because I was starting to ask her what's wrong. It was dead silent, and all of a sudden you hear a footstep right beside the tent. The little flap that covers the zippers was even moving. Thankfully, my mom has quick wits and said very loudly, "Kenny, grab the gun." Kenny is my dad, although that doesn't matter. In mine, he was not there, just us girls like I previously said. They left. No harm was done, thank the Lord for my mom. When I was in high school, I had a lot of these experiences. At the house my dad lived in at the time, it was really old, built in the early 1800s. There were plenty of times I'd be sitting in the living room and distinctly hear the cabinets opening and closing in the kitchen. It was just me and my dad that lived in the house, and you could clearly see when his bedroom door was shut and he was asleep but still hearing. Normally my dad worked 7 to 3, but occasionally worked a PM or overnight shift. One night he was working until 11. I was 17 at the time. Around 8 or so, I'm sitting in my room playing Borderlands, and I think I hear footsteps coming from the living room. And I assume my dad's home early, so I go back to playing Borderlands. I keep hearing the steps, so I pause the game and listen, and the footsteps are just slowly pacing back and forth between the living room and the kitchen in a steady rhythm. I laid in bed scared to death and actually counted the steps. Every time it took 15 spaces to the living room, 15 back to the kitchen. Needless to say, I did not effing sleep that night. Had another situation at my mom's house about 2 years prior to this. Out of nowhere, my alarm clock would go off at midnight every night. I assumed it was busted and got rid of it. Fast forward 2 years, my mom gets another brand new alarm clock for my room. Suddenly, the alarm goes off at midnight again. I thought nothing of it, turned it off, and it happened again the next night. And then my sister pointed out the old one I had that did it, so I checked and made sure no alarms were set. Double checked at 11:56. Sure enough, 4 minutes later, my alarm goes off. Freaked out, I threw it out. The next night was my dad's night to have me. I have a buddy of mine over. My dad was working that night. He left for work around 2 a.m. and my friend had brought over an iPad dock to listen to music on. Didn't have the clock set or anything. My friend knew nothing of the last couple nights, so I knew he wasn't messing with me. So about 2 minutes after my dad leaves, we hear an alarm clock coming from my room. I went in, and you know how if you just plug in the clock without seeing it, the numbers just blink on and off? Well, it was doing that. As soon as I picked it up, the clock set itself to 12 and just turned off by itself. So yeah, that paranormal stuff. I'm not religious at all, but I'm 100% convinced that it happens. Was sitting in my room at like 11:30 p.m. Heard lots of stuff downstairs, and I assumed it was my mom. I'd heard her walk up the stairs to my room, stop. I called out to her, she didn't say anything, and walked downstairs. I went down about a half hour later to find a piece of paper with the words, "You're lucky, I'm scared too." And a whole bunch of stuff was missing. I called my mom. She was still hadn't arrived home from dinner. She was out with her friends. I called the cops and locked myself in the bathroom, but I think they left when they realized I still was home. Probably the most scared I've ever been when I was hiding in the bathroom.